The stars had always called to humanity. Even when they lived in caves and painted on walls, humans looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there. It took them thousands of years to find out, and when they finally reached the stars, they discovered they were not alone. The galaxy was full of life. Hundreds of species had built empires among the stars long before humans learned to make fire. They had faster ships, better weapons, and technology that seemed like magic. When humanity finally left Earth and ventured into the wider galaxy, these elder races looked at them the way a grown man looks at a crawling baby. The Galactic Concord was the great alliance that governed most of known space. 47 species sat on its council, making laws and keeping peace. When humans arrived, they were given a small seat at the back of the room. They were told to be quiet, to learn, and to be grateful they were allowed to exist at all. For 300 years, humanity played along. They smiled when other species mocked them. They nodded when they were told their ships were primitive. They stayed silent when their colonies were taxed unfairly and their traders were cheated. The elder races thought humans were weak. They thought humans were afraid. They were very, very wrong. Admiral Daniel Carter stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, the largest warship humanity had ever built. At least, the largest warship anyone knew about. Daniel was 53 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. He had spent his entire life in the Navy, climbing the ranks one step at a time. Now he commanded the entire human fleet. In his hands, he held a document that would change everything. Commander Lisa stood beside him, waiting in silence. She was his second in command, a brilliant tactical officer who had grown up on the colony world of New Singapore. She was 38, with sharp eyes and a mind that worked faster than most computers. "Read it again," she said quietly. Daniel looked down at the document. It was an ultimatum from the Empire, the most powerful military force in the Concord. There were tall, reptilian creatures with scales the color of dried blood. They had conquered 17 star systems and enslaved dozens of species. They believed they were destined to rule the galaxy. The Empire demands the immediate and unconditional surrender of the human colony on 442B, Daniel read aloud. All human settlers will be relocated to labor camps. All human military vessels in the system will be destroyed. Humanity has 72 hours to comply. Failure to comply will result in the complete destruction of Earth. Lisa's jaw tightened. They cannot be serious. They are completely serious, Daniel replied. They have been planning this for years. They want our colony because it sits on the largest deposit of quantum crystals in this sector, and they know the Conquered will not stop them. No one ever stops them. The colony on 442B was home to 2 million people, families, children, farmers and teachers and doctors who had left Earth to build a new life among the stars. They wanted to put them all in chains. Daniel set down the document and walked to the main. Outside, the stars burned cold and bright against the endless dark. Somewhere out there, the fleet was gathering. 800 warships, each one bristling with weapons. It was the largest military force in the Concord. "They think we only have a few dozen ships," Lisa said. "Old relics from the early expansion era. That is what everyone thinks." Daniel allowed himself a small smile. Yes, that is exactly what everyone thinks. What the galaxy did not know was that humanity had been preparing for this moment for 200 years. It started after the incident when that cruel species had enslaved a human colony for 18 months. The Conquered had done nothing. No one had come to help. Humanity had to rescue their own people, and they lost thousands in the process. After that, Earth's leaders made a decision. They would never be weak again. They would never rely on anyone else for protection. They would build a fleet so powerful that no one would ever dare threaten them again. But they would do it in secret. Deep in the asteroid belts of a dozen star systems, humanity constructed hidden shipyards. They worked in silence, in darkness, where no one could see. The best engineers, the scientists, the most skilled workers, all of them dedicated their lives to a single purpose: building the Armada. It took 2 centuries, 200 years of sacrifice and secrecy. Families kept the truth from their own children. Workers died never knowing if their efforts would matter, but they kept building. Ship after ship, weapon after weapon, technology that the galaxy had never seen. And now finally it was time. Daniel turned to Lisa. "How many ships do we have?" She checked her. 4,200 combat vessels, battleships, carriers, cruisers, destroyers, frigates, plus another 800 support ships. And they have 800. 812, according to our intelligence. Daniel nodded slowly. The numbers were overwhelming, 5 to 1. And that did not even count the technological advantage. Human scientists had developed weapons and shields that made technology look like toys. Plasma batteries that could cut through any armor. Quantum drives that were twice as fast as anything else in the galaxy. Stealth systems that could hide an entire fleet. For 300 years, humanity had pretended to be weak. They had endured the insults, the mockery, the unfair treatment. They had waited and watched and prepared. Now the waiting was over. Daniel opened a communication channel to Earth. On the screen appeared the face of President, leader of the United Human Federation. She was an older woman with white hair and steel in her eyes. "Admiral Carter," she said, "I assume you have received the ultimatum." "I have, Madam President." "And what is your recommendation?" Daniel stood straight, his voice steady and clear. "We do not surrender. We do not negotiate. We show them what humanity is truly capable of." President was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded. "You have your orders, Admiral. Protect our people, and make sure the galaxy never forgets this day." The channel closed. Daniel turned to his crew, to the men and women who had trained their whole lives for this moment. They were afraid. He could see it in their eyes, but they were also ready. "Send the message," Daniel ordered. "Tell them their ultimatum is rejected. Tell them that humanity does not bow to tyrants, and tell them that if they want a war, they will get one." The message was sent. The die was cast. Humanity had declared war on the most powerful empire in the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same again. The message spread across human space like wildfire. From Earth to the farthest colony, from the richest city to the mining station, everyone heard the news. War had come. The Empire had threatened humanity, and humanity had refused to kneel. For most people in the galaxy, this seemed like madness. They had the largest military in the conquered. They had conquered entire civilizations. What could humanity possibly do against such power? But in secret bases and hidden shipyards across a dozen star systems, men and women who had waited their entire lives finally received the call they had been preparing for. It was time to gather the fleet. Captain Brooks stood on the bridge of his destroyer, the Relentless, watching the red dust storms of Mars swirl below. He was 41 years old, born and raised in the underground cities of the Red Planet. His family had worked in the shipyards for 3 generations, building vessels in secret, never knowing when they would be used. Now he knew. His communications officer turned to him. "Captain, we have received orders from Admiral Carter. All vessels are to proceed to Waypoint Omega immediately." Nodded. He had trained for this moment since he was 18 years old. Every simulation, every drill, every sleepless night had been leading to this. "Signal the rest of the squadron. We move in 1 hour." Across human space, similar scenes were playing out. Lieutenant Commander Amy led her stealth frigates from the outer rim, where they had been hiding in the shadow of a gas giant for years. Commander Greg brought his heavy cruisers from the shipyards of Titan. Captain Maria Santos gathered her carrier group from the asteroid belts. Ships that had never been seen by outside eyes now emerged from their hiding places. Destroyers and frigates, cruisers and battleships, carriers loaded with fighters, all of them moving toward a single point in space. Waypoint Omega was a dead system with no planets, no stations, and no strategic value. It was chosen specifically because no one would ever think to look there. Just a lonely star burning in the void, surrounded by empty space. Admiral Daniel Carter arrived first with the Defiance and its escort group. He stood on the observation deck, watching the empty darkness, waiting for his fleet to arrive. Commander Lisa joined him. The first ship should be arriving within the hour. Daniel said nothing, he just watched the stars. The first group to arrive was the Mars Squadron, led by Brooks. 12 destroyers dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming under the distant starlight, opened a channel to the Defiance. Mars Squadron reporting for duty, Admiral. Welcome, Captain Brooks. Take your position in the formation. Then came the stealth frigates from the outer rim. 24 ships that were almost invisible against the blackness of space. Then the heavy cruisers from Titan. Then the carriers from the asteroid belts. Ship after ship after ship, emerging from hyperspace like ghosts appearing from the darkness. Daniel watched in silence as his fleet assembled. He had seen the numbers on paper. He had studied the reports and the projections, but seeing it with his own eyes was something else entirely. 4,200 warships. They hung in the void like a field of stars, their running lights creating patterns against the darkness. Battleships the size of small cities, carriers that could launch hundreds of fighters, cruisers bristling with weapons, destroyers fast enough to outrun anything in the galaxy. This was humanity's hidden strength. This was the result of 200 years of sacrifice and secrecy. Lisa stood beside Daniel, her eyes wide with wonder. I knew the numbers, she whispered, but I never imagined it would look like this. No one did, Daniel replied. That was the point. In the hours that followed, the fleet organized itself into battle groups. Each captain knew their role, their position, their orders. They had trained for this in simulations, but now it was real. The weight of it hung heavy in the air. On the Relentless, Brooks gathered his crew in the main hall. They were young, most of them. Boys and girls who had grown up on Mars, who had never seen Earth except in pictures. They were scared. He could see it in their faces. I know you are afraid, said, his voice calm and steady. I am afraid too. Only a fool would not be afraid of what we are about to do, but I want you to remember something. We are not fighting for glory. We are not fighting for conquest. We are fighting for our families, for our children, for every human being who has ever been told they do not matter. He paused, looking at each face in turn. They think we are weak. They think we will surrender and let them take our people. They are wrong. We have been preparing for this day for 200 years. Our parents prepared for it. Our grandparents prepared for it. And now it is our turn to finish what they started. Similar speeches were being given across the fleet. Captains talking to their crews, officers encouraging their soldiers, pilots preparing their fighters. Everyone knew what was at stake. Everyone knew that the next few days would decide the fate of humanity. On the Defiance, Admiral Carter prepared to address the entire fleet. Every ship, every soldier, every pilot, all of them would hear his words. He stood on the bridge, the main showing his face to 4,000 vessels. He took a deep breath and began to speak. Soldiers of humanity, for 300 years we have been told we are weak. We have been told we do not matter. We have been pushed aside, mocked, and threatened. They believe they can take our colonies, enslave our people, and destroy our. They believe we will bow down and accept our fate. His voice grew stronger, harder, filled with cold determination. They are wrong. Today we show the galaxy who we truly are. Today we remind them why they should have feared the species that crawled out of the mud and reached for the stars. We are humanity. We do not surrender. We do not kneel. And we do not forgive those who threaten our people. He raised his fist. For Earth, for our colonies, for every human being who ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of something greater. Today we fight." The response was a roar that echoed across 4,000 ships, cheers and shouts and cries of determination. Fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Pride, purpose, the knowledge that they were part of something greater than themselves. Admiral Carter turned to his navigation officer. "Set course for the home system. All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump." The fleet aligned itself, 4,000 vessels pointing toward the same distant star. Engines powered up. Hyperspace drives hummed with energy. "Jump in 3, 2, 1." The fleet vanished into hyperspace as one, leaving behind only empty darkness. They were heading toward the heart of the most powerful empire in the galaxy. And they were not afraid anymore. The home system was called the heart of the empire. 7 planets orbited a yellow star, and at the center of it all was Prime, a world of red deserts and towering cities that had ruled this sector of space for 10,000 years. They believed their civilization would last forever. They believed no one would ever dare challenge them. High Admiral stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Crimson Talon, watching the sensor displays with bored eyes. He was old his scales faded to a dull brown, but his mind was still sharp. He had commanded fleets for 60 years. He had crushed rebellions and conquered worlds. He was not worried about the humans. "Any response to our ultimatum?" he asked his communications officer. "Yes, High Admiral. The humans have rejected our demands. They say they will not surrender." Laughed a harsh sound like stones grinding together. "Foolish creatures. They have no idea what they are facing. How many ships can they possibly send? 50, 100. Our intelligence suggests they have fewer than 40 combat vessels, High Admiral." "Then this will not even be a battle. It will be an execution." Around him, the 800 ships of the defensive fleet held their positions. They were arranged in a perfect sphere around Prime, their weapons ready, their shields at full power. Each ship was crewed by warriors who had trained since birth. Each captain had proven themselves in dozens of battles. They were the greatest military force in the galaxy. And they had no idea what was coming. The first human ship appeared at the edge of the system without warning. One moment the sensors showed empty space. The next moment there was a vessel, a human destroyer, small and unremarkable. Frowned, "Just one ship. Is this some kind of joke?" Then another ship appeared, and another, and another. The sensor officer's voice rose with each word. "High Admiral, 10 ships, 50 ships, 100 ships." Leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "What?" 200, 500, 1,000. The bridge fell silent. Every officer stared at their screens in disbelief. Ships were pouring out of hyperspace like water from a broken dam. Destroyers, frigates, cruisers, battleships, carriers. More ships than anyone had ever seen gathered in one place. 2,000 ships, 3,000, 4,000. Felt something he had not felt in 60 years of warfare: fear. "That is impossible," he whispered. "Where did they come from? How could they hide so many ships?" No one had an answer. On the bridge of the USS Defiance, Admiral Daniel Carter watched the fleet on his. 800 ships against 4,000. The numbers were heavily in humanity's favor, but he knew numbers were not everything. There were experienced warriors. They had technology that had been refined over centuries. This would not be easy. "All ships report status," he ordered. Commander Lisa checked her displays. "All battle groups in position, Admiral. Weapons charged, shields at maximum." Daniel nodded. He opened a channel to the flagship. "High Admiral, this is Admiral Daniel Carter of the United Human Federation. You threatened our colonies. You threatened You gave us 72 hours to surrender. That time has passed. Now we are here to give you a choice. Withdraw your forces and release all human prisoners or face the consequences." His face appeared his reptilian features were twisted with rage and confusion. "This is a trick. This cannot be real. Where did you get these ships? We built them, Daniel replied calmly. While you mocked us and ignored us, we were preparing. Now you will see what humanity is capable of. You are bluffing, your technology is primitive, your weapons cannot. Daniel cut the channel, he had heard enough. All ships, weapons free, begin the attack. The first volley came from Captain Cole and the heavy cruiser Ironclad. His ship's plasma batteries, a weapon the galaxy had never seen, fired a brilliant blue beam that crossed the distance between the fleets in seconds. It struck a battleship directly in the center. The shields, the best in the Concord, lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then they collapsed. The plasma beam cut through the ship's armor like a hot knife through butter. The battleship exploded in a ball of fire. Across the battlefield, the same scene repeated itself. Human weapons tore through defenses as if they were made of paper. Ships that had never lost a battle were destroyed in moments. Crews that had trained their whole lives died before they could fire a single shot. Captain Brooks led his destroyer squadron in a flanking maneuver, cutting off the escape route. Lieutenant Commander Amy and her stealth frigates appeared behind the enemy fleet, striking from the shadows. Captain Maria Santos launched wave after wave of fighters from her carriers, filling the void with swarming death. High Admiral tried to organize a counterattack, but it was hopeless. His ships were too slow, his weapons too weak. Every time he formed a battle line, human ships would tear it apart. Every time he tried to retreat, they cut him off. "This cannot be happening," he muttered, watching his fleet die around him. "This cannot be happening." The battle lasted 6 hours, but the outcome was decided in the first 30 minutes. They fought bravely. No one could deny that. They did not surrender, did not run. They stood and fought until the last ship was destroyed. When it was over, 800 vessels had been reduced to drifting wreckage. Not a single human ship had been destroyed. Several had been damaged, but the repair crews were already at work. The technological gap had been simply too vast. Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of the Defiance, looking down at Prime. The red planet hung in the void, its cities still visible as points of light on the dark side. Millions have lived down there. Civilians, families, children. "Open a channel to their government," he ordered. A trembling official appeared on the screen. His scales were pale with fear. "Please, please, we surrender. Do not destroy our world." Daniel shook his head. "We are not here to destroy your world. We are not like you, but you will answer for what you have done. You will release all human prisoners. You will pay for the damage you have caused, and you will never threaten humanity again." The official nodded frantically. "Yes, yes, we agree, whatever you want." Lisa stepped up beside Daniel. "Admiral, we are receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. Every species in the Concord is watching. They are shocked." Daniel allowed himself a small smile. "Good, let them watch. Let them see what happens when you push humanity too far." He looked out at the stars, at the debris field that had once been the greatest fleet in the galaxy. Let them all see. News traveled fast in the galaxy. Within hours of the battle, every species in the Concord knew what had happened. The defensive fleet, 800 of the most powerful warships ever built, had been completely destroyed, and the humans had not lost a single ship. On 1,000 worlds, in 1,000,000 homes, people watched the recordings with disbelief. They saw the human fleet emerge from hyperspace, an endless tide of vessels that blocked out the stars. They saw ships explode like toys. They saw the greatest military power in the galaxy brought to its knees in a matter of hours. And they were afraid. The Galactic Concord called an emergency session. Representatives from 47 species gathered in the Great Council Chamber, a massive dome floating in neutral space. They came with questions, with fears, with demands for explanation. How had humanity hidden such a fleet? How had they developed such technology? And most importantly, what did they want? Commander Greg was chosen to represent humanity at the council. He was a diplomat by training but a soldier by experience. He had spent 20 years in the Navy before moving to the political branch. He knew how to fight with words as well as weapons. He arrived at the council station with an escort of 200 warships, not because he expected trouble, but because he wanted the council to see exactly what they were dealing with. The council chamber was full when he entered. 47 species watched him walk to the central platform. Some looked at him with fear, others with anger, a few with grudging respect. The delegate sat in the front row. His people were creatures with multiple eyes and clicking mandibles. 18 years ago, they had captured a human colony and forced the people to work in their mines. Men, women, and children, all of them treated like animals. When humanity finally rescued them, they had laughed. They said humans were too weak to seek revenge. The delegate would not meet Greg's eyes now. Greg took his place at the center of the chamber. He looked around at the assembled representatives, the rulers of civilizations that had existed for thousands of years. For 3 centuries, these beings had looked down on humanity. They had mocked human technology, human culture, human ambition. They were not mocking anymore. Distinguished representatives of the Galactic Concord, Greg began, his voice calm and clear. I am here to explain humanity's position. We did not seek this war. We did not want this conflict. The Empire threatened our colonies and they gave us an ultimatum, surrender or die. We chose neither. A murmur ran through the chamber. The delegate, a tall being with blue skin and silver eyes, raised his hand. How did you build such a fleet without anyone knowing? We have monitored your systems for centuries. Greg smiled. You monitored what we wanted you to see. You saw old ships, outdated technology, a primitive species struggling to survive. That was the mask we wore. Behind the mask we were building. For 200 years we were preparing for the day when someone would push us too far. Another delegate spoke, a representative, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. You destroyed our fleet. You murdered our soldiers. This is an act of war against the entire Concord. No, Greg replied firmly. This is justice. Your empire threatened to enslave 2 million human civilians. Your emperor promised to destroy Earth. We defended ourselves, nothing more. The chamber erupted in argument. Some delegates demanded that humanity be punished. Others called for negotiations. A few quietly suggested that perhaps they deserved what they got. Greg raised his hand for silence. When the noise died down, he spoke again. Humanity has no desire to conquer the galaxy. We have no interest in ruling other species or taking their worlds. We want only one thing, to be left in peace, but we will not be threatened. We will not be enslaved, and we will not stand by while innocent people suffer. He looked directly at the representative. Any species that stands with the Empire will share their fate. Any species that remains neutral will be left in peace. The choice is yours. The vote was held immediately. 46 species voted to remain neutral. Only the voted to continue the war. They stood alone. While diplomacy played out at the council, Admiral Daniel Carter continued the military campaign. The human fleet pushed deeper into territory, liberating system after system. Everywhere they went, they found evidence of cruelty: slave camps, prison worlds, entire civilizations crushed under imperial rule. Captain Maria Santos led the liberation of 3 human colonies that they had captured years ago. When her ships arrived at the first colony, she found 10,000 people living in underground mines, working 18 hours a day, barely surviving on scraps of food. Maria was not a woman who cried easily, but when she saw the children, thin, pale, with hollow eyes, she felt tears running down her face. Get them food, she ordered her crew. Get them medical care. Get them anything they need. A young boy, no more than 8 years old, looked up at her with confusion. Are you real? He asked. The guards said no one was coming. They said Earth forgot about us. Maria knelt down and took his hand. Earth never forgot. We just needed time to get strong enough to come save you, and now we are here." The liberation of the colonies sent a powerful message across the galaxy. Humanity was not fighting for conquest. They were fighting for their people. They were fighting for justice. Lieutenant Murphy led a daring raid on a shipyard, destroying 30 vessels before they could be completed. Captain Brooks captured an admiral and forced him to reveal the locations of all remaining human prisoners. One by one, the pieces of the Empire began to fall. Back on the Defiance, Admiral Carter reviewed the reports. The war was going well, better than anyone had expected, but he knew the hardest part was still to come. "They are gathering their remaining forces at there," Lisa reported. "Our intelligence says they have about 2,000 ships, everything they have left." Daniel nodded slowly. "They are going to make a last stand. Yes, they know they cannot win, but they will fight anyway. They would rather die than surrender." Daniel thought about that for a long moment. They had caused so much suffering. They had enslaved innocent people, threatened to destroy entire worlds. Part of him wanted to show them the same mercy they had shown others. But that was not who humanity was. That was not who he was. "Then we will give them the chance to surrender," he said finally. "But if they refuse, we will end this war once and for all." The fleet changed course, heading for Prime. The final battle was coming. The sky above Prime had always been clear and peaceful. For 10,000 years, the people of this world had looked up and seen only their own ships, the proud vessels of an empire that ruled 17 star systems. They had never known fear. They had never imagined that anyone would dare challenge their supremacy. Now when they looked up, they saw fire. They had gathered everything they had left. 2,000 warships formed a defensive sphere around there. Every soldier, every pilot, every captain who could hold a weapon had been called to the final battle. They knew what was coming. They knew they could not win, but they were a proud people, and they would not surrender without a fight. Emperor III stood in his palace, watching that showed his fleet. He was old and tired, his scales gray with age. He had ruled the empire for 40 years. He had overseen countless conquests, crushed endless rebellions. He had believed that his civilization would last forever. Now he watched it prepare to die. "The human fleet is approaching, Your Majesty," his advisor said quietly. "Over 4,000 ships. They will be here within the hour." The Emperor said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Admiral Daniel Carter stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the grow larger on the red deserts and silver cities, a beautiful world in its own way, home to billions of people who had nothing to do with their government's crimes. "Admiral," Lisa said, "the fleet is moving into attack formation. They are powering weapons. Open a channel to their flagship." The face of the fleet commander appeared on the screen. He was young for a commander, his scales still bright red. He looked at Daniel with hatred in his eyes. "Human, you have come to finish your destruction." "I have come to offer you one last chance," Daniel replied calmly. "Surrender now, and your people will be spared. Your soldiers can return to their families. Your civilians will not be harmed. The only thing I ask is that the Empire answers for its crimes and releases all prisoners." The commander laughed bitterly. "Surrender to primitives, to insects who crawled out of the mud only yesterday. The do not surrender, we would rather die." Daniel sighed. He had known this would be the answer, but he had to try. "Then you will have your wish, but remember you chose this, not us." He cut the channel and turned to his officers. "All ships prepare for battle, formation hammer." The human fleet spread out into a massive formation that wrapped around the defensive sphere. Commander Lisa led the starboard flanking group, 800 ships ready to strike from the right. Captain Brooks commanded the port side group, another 800 ships on the left. Admiral Carter himself held the center with 2,000 vessels, the main hammer that would break the enemy apart. "All ships report ready, Admiral," Lisa said. Daniel looked at the one last time. 2,000 ships against 4,000 human vessels. The same technology gap as before. The same overwhelming advantage. But they would fight anyway because that was who they were. He respected them for that, even as he prepared to destroy them. "All ships," he said quietly, "begin the attack." The battle began at dawn on Prime. Citizens in the capital city looked up to see their sky filled with light, the flash of weapons, the explosion of ships, the death of an empire written in fire across the heavens. They fought with desperate courage. Their ships charged into the human lines, trying to break through, trying to do any damage they could. Some human vessels were hit, damaged, knocked out of formation. The cruiser Ironclad lost its forward weapons array. The destroyer Relentless took a direct hit to its engine section. But it was not enough. It could never have been enough. Human plasma batteries tore through shields in seconds. Quantum torpedoes struck with impossible accuracy. Fighter squadrons swarmed enemy vessels like angry insects, overwhelming their defenses through sheer numbers. Captain Brooks led his squadron directly into the heart of the formation, drawing fire while the main fleet flanked around. It was dangerous, suicidal, some would say, but it worked. They focused on his destroyers, and by the time they realized their mistake, human ships were everywhere. Commander Lisa commanded her group with cold precision, picking off vessels one by one. She had lost friends to the Empire's cruelty. She had seen the slave camps, the prison worlds, the broken bodies of people who had committed no crime except being human. She felt no joy in this destruction, but she felt no guilt either. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, the fleet existed only as debris, a field of wreckage orbiting their own. Not a single enemy vessel remained operational. The Empire's military power had been completely destroyed. Admiral Carter looked down at Prime. The cities were still there, still intact. The civilians were safe. As he had promised, humanity had not come to commit genocide. "Open a channel to the Imperial Palace," he ordered. Emperor III appeared on the screen. He looked like a broken man, old, tired, defeated. The pride that had defined his people for 10,000 years was gone from his eyes. "Admiral Carter," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you have won. What do you want from us?" Daniel spoke clearly so that everyone watching across the galaxy could hear. "Your empire enslaved 3 of our colonies. You killed 14,000 human civilians. You threatened to destroy for these crimes, you will pay." The Emperor bowed his head. "Name your terms." "The empire is dissolved. All conquered territories will be granted independence. All prisoners of all species will be released immediately. Your military will be limited to defensive forces only, and you will pay reparations to every species you have harmed." The Emperor was silent for a long moment, then he nodded. "We accept." "One more thing," Daniel said quietly. "You thought we were weak because we chose peace. You were wrong. We chose peace because we knew what we were capable of if we chose war. Remember that, and make sure your children remember it too." The treaty was signed that evening. The Empire, the most powerful force in the galaxy for 10,000 years, was no more. As the human fleet prepared to leave, Commander Lisa stood beside Admiral Carter on the observation deck of the Defiance. Outside, the stars burned cold and bright against the endless darkness. "What happens now?" she asked. Daniel watched a group of former slave ships departing, carrying freed prisoners back to their homes. "Now we go back to being peaceful. We rebuild what was lost. We take care of our people. And the rest of the galaxy." He smiled slightly. "They will remember. For 1,000 years, they will tell stories about what happened here, about the day humanity showed the galaxy what we are truly capable of." The fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind a changed galaxy. Across 1,000 worlds, species that had once mocked humanity now spoke of them with respect and fear. The elder races who had dismissed humans as primitive upstarts now understood the truth. Humanity was not weak. They had simply chosen not to show their strength. And now everyone knew, never underestimate the humans, because when pushed too far, they will push back with a force the galaxy had never seen. The war was over, humanity had won, and nothing would ever be the same again.